Leah Bryant. I am the Interim Executive Director at the Education Trust New York.
So I'm Jessica Ramos. I'm the Director of Community Engagement at Advance Illinois.
Hi, I'm Erin Hart. I'm the Senior VP and Chief Impact Officer at Expect More Arizona.
My name is Barry Irwin. I'm President of Council for Better Louisiana.
Hi, I'm Teresa Wasson. I work at the State Collaborative on Reforming Education in Tennessee. We're called SCORE for short.
My name is Kevin Duff. I'm the Director of Policy and Research at Ohio Excels.
For the Action Accelerator, we actually did a set of focus groups to determine what parents, and specifically parents of color in New York State, were interested in when it came to assessments this year, given that the pandemic disrupted so much of student learning.
And our project with See Common Ground was actually to do a series of focus groups across the state to better understand the impacts of the pandemic on Illinois communities and families, students, as well as their perspectives around assessment.
Our project was really to try and provide some more transparency in this time of COVID in terms of what's going on in school districts and schools around the state.
Our project with the Measurement, Assessment, and Accountability Accelerator project was to conduct a poll among Tennessee parents about their attitudes and perceptions about a statewide assessment this year, and also about their experiences during this school year that has been so disrupted by COVID-19.
We were able to conduct 4 community forums in Southern Arizona and here in Central Arizona in the Phoenix area to hear that voice from parents.
So for the MAA Accelerator, we have used the funds to help understand what parents value when it comes to reporting student performance and school performance.
And by holding the focus groups, we were able to understand a little bit of the nuance in those arguments. Specifically, there were parents who were saying, like, we want the tests, but I don't know if I want to send my kid back to a building. Is there a way that we can do this remotely? There were parents who said, we want the tests, we need that information. And, you know, is there a way to think about, you know, giving it differently? Like, do we have to put them in a standardized environment? So that helped to build sort of our understanding of what parents wanted and what parents needed the assessments to be.
That we had to shift away from our strategic plan and our priorities that we had launched the year before the pandemic, you know, led to these restrictions that we're currently experiencing now. We recognized that we needed to go straight to communities and listen to what their experiences are with education and what they need as we think for the road ahead. You know, we need assessments, end of year assessments, to inform how we make decisions in the years to come. We need some type of information. And we also need to better understand the social emotional well-being of students in ways that we previously may not have been collecting information. What are the rates of trauma? How are we supporting students? How are we ensuring targeted supports? And with that, you know, we are getting better about connecting what we're hearing from communities to inform how we talk about assessments.
The other thing that we heard from parents was that they had concerns around grading and felt like their schools and grading just felt out of touch with the moment. That really resonated for me because it's really a reflection that because of the moment that we're in and the environment that we're in with the COVID pandemic, that we should be putting first and foremost at the focus of our work how, you know, the heart and the health of our students, both mentally and physically, to make sure everybody's doing okay. You know, is everyone healthy? Is everyone showing up? What kind of trauma are people going through? What kind of mental supports do people need to be able to be their most healthy self? What we've heard from parents and what their concerns were how do we effectively measure student progress? There's no way for them, and these were their words, for them to really understand how their child was doing. In many cases, parents were not able to help their kiddos with their coursework because they're not equipped to do so. They're not teachers and they're not IT experts, but they're often asked on a daily basis to help their kids navigate in some cases, what were pretty complex IT systems or computers, which might be new to home environment. We also heard a lot of concern for parents who had kids of special needs and making sure that those kiddos were receiving services. Because as we all know, with schools being closed or with limited accessibility, there was a lot of there's a missed opportunity there for kids to be receiving special ed services along the way.
Our parent polls, including the one we just conducted as part of this project, have consistently found strong support for statewide assessment, usually around 90%. And that's been true for a decade now. The growing realization of the equity challenges in education and the limitations of current assessment delivery, I think could result in a shift from expecting one assessment to do it all to perhaps a series of more frequent but shorter assessments across the school year to gather even more data that can be used to support students a little bit more in real time as well as going forward.
I think the good news out of our project is we kind of started with virtually no information, except maybe just a very tiny bit. But working with the Department of Education here, we were able to actually get a much more robust set of data about what's going on around the state and continuing that actually going forward. But the other thing it kind of showed us that it wasn't just confined to rural areas. You had urban areas, for instance, in Jefferson Parish, which is a totally urban school district. You had a couple of others that had large urban school districts within those parishes where they had more than half of their kids that did not have connectivity. That wasn't because they didn't have internet connections in those areas. It was because those kids didn't have access probably because of income levels, because of the cost, all of those types of things to actually access the technology that was technically available there. So I think the bottom line of it is it just was put a finer point on the issue that we deal with in our state with equity. We know we deal with it across the board, but this was just one where we could really focus on it and have some hard data that really kind of pointed that out.
We have been using the results from that to not only guide our policy stances and how we've been working with other groups and coalitions to come up with solutions. But one of the most interesting findings that we found after asking parents that, how do you think that the pandemic has affected the academic progress of your child? And we were really surprised to see how many parents actually said that it had a positive influence. And so right now we're working to figure out, well, why do they say that? What about the pandemic actually made at least their perception of academic progress improve? And how can we take that and change our system in the future to improve it for all kids? We also asked things about what they're prioritizing when it comes to assessments. They do want assessment this year. They do want public reporting. And we also asked about what supports they think they will need. We asked parents, do you think your child, and we asked parents of kids in high school and middle school, do you think that your child will need an extra year of learning after senior year, before they go into college or the workforce, to continue learning? And I was expecting 10, 15%, 20% might say yes. Nearly half parents said yes, my child might need an extra year in order to be ready to graduate. And so that's been something that's really caught a lot of our policymakers and advocates here by surprise. And we think that's going to be just one part of the conversations about how do we catch kids up? How do we close the gaps that have emerged?
So I think that assessment is well ingrained in Tennessee and is likely here to stay.
And I think there is what you're speaking to, which is this future arm where assessments are inclusive, respectful of differences across learning modalities and learning preferences. I think the future of assessments actually measures learning and provides a path forward for students that is differentiated, specific, and unique to the needs of children. and to individual children.
Real opportunity for Arizona to take a step back, to get back to the purpose of what an effective assessment and accountability system could be and who they're for, who the audience is, and to do it through a lens of equity, right? To do it through a lens of how are we going to help the students who need the most help? How are we going to support the teachers in struggling schools? How are we going to make sure that all kids have an opportunity to succeed?
We're still going to maintain our assessments. We've certainly put some pause on our accountability piece of it, so that the consequences that were typically there, from the assessments at the end of the year have been put on pause again for this year. That's appropriate. We certainly support that. But we also support the idea that we do need to have the assessments to try and, make sure the public has some sense of where our kids are, particularly after this, extraordinary, year and a half that we're going to end up having gone through.
At Advanced Illinois, we believe that we need that information. We need information to understand the impacts of the pandemic, how and to what extent it has impacted our Black and Latinx students and our students of low-income backgrounds. I think first of all, the funding that made it possible allowed us to do something that we had never done at the organization before. And that was, to host focus groups across the state in a remote setting. And even with that in mind, we went above and beyond, and we engaged over 100 students and parents and caregivers when folks thought that, that was a wild idea that was going to be really challenging during a pandemic. And we made that happen. And it was, learning something from peers. And I think that's always great. I think that the other thing I really appreciated was, and I will always give shout outs to Dia at Education Trust and her thoughtful ways of framing the work around assessments and also just the work we do to advance racial equity for our students. I think every time I walked out of one of those convenings, I walked out feeling like I learned something, and I really appreciated that.
And it's so powerful when you hear back from community members what's important to them in this moment. And particularly because we've never been through a moment like COVID and systemic racism all at the same time. So it was really great to hear folks be driven by community and data informed, right? To really use what they knew, but to texturize and color that picture with what communities needed. And I think it's something that will consistently shape the work that I continue to do.
The real value of this project for us in Arizona has been that we've been able to access this incredible group of advocates from across the country who are doing similar work to us, who all have hearts for equity, and who have done this work before. So we were able to use their examples and their knowledge to help us shape the tools that we used, that shaped our action plan, and even shaped some of the people that we hired on to be facilitators.
Those of us in the Action Accelerator were talking through our projects and our findings, was a consistency of parent concerns across different racial, ethnic, geographic, and socioeconomic groups. That doesn't mean that parents are a monolith, but it means that there may be a lot more in common among parents than we had thought previously, or that I had thought previously, for sure. And so that it raises the possibilities of finding common ground among these parents to build support for the policies that we think are so important for students.
I think what it did for us was that it had a great deal of flexibility that allowed us to take something that we had been thinking about that we wanted to do, where we felt like there was a gap in our state that we wanted to try and fill, and then actually do that. Can't say enough about, that ability to have the flexibility to go after something that we felt like was a gap in our state, and you were able to help us fill.
So having been part of both phases of the Action Accelerator, it's been great to see that some of the great things from the first one have stayed, and then there were some improvements as well. They also brought in some great experts that knew exactly who were experts in the things that we were trying to address, and so we found those sessions very helpful as well. Common Ground has been very great about making sure that the project isn't too prescriptive, and there is a flexibility for us to really address the community and in our case, state specific conditions that we need to address. We didn't get a grant proposal or a request for proposal that said, here are the 5 things that you have to do. It's let's advance, let's improve the environment for measurement, assessment, and accountability. What do you need?
I think leveraging the expertise of the Seek Common Ground team and the expertise of the participating organizations in the Accelerator.
So I would say to anyone is if you get a chance to do a project like this, where you're collaborating with peers in other locations, I say go for it. It will really help you in your work.